Kevin never thought much about his sleep paralysis. At first, it was just an annoying sensation, waking up in the middle of the night, unable to move. He had read about it before. Just a temporary disconnection between the brain and the body, nothing to worry about. But lately, things had changed. It started 2 weeks ago. The paralysis came more frequently, and instead of waking up in an empty, silent room, he began to feel something watching him, a shadow standing in the corner. He told himself it was just his imagination, a trick of the mind caused by fear. Last night, however, was different. Kevin woke up to the familiar feeling of being trapped in his own body. His chest felt heavy, and his breathing was shallow. The room was dark, but something felt wrong. Then he saw it. The shadow in the corner was not just standing anymore. It was moving, slowly, creeping toward him. His heart pounded as he struggled to scream, to move, to do anything. But he was frozen. As the figure loomed over him, he felt an icy touch on his forehead. His vision blurred, and his body tingled as if his soul was being pulled away. And then, just before he lost consciousness, a whisper. "You are mine." The shadow that watches, the escalation. Kevin woke up gasping for air. His body was drenched in sweat, his heart racing like he had just run a marathon. He sat up quickly, scanning the room. The shadow was gone. The only thing left was the suffocating silence of his dimly lit dorm room. He ran a trembling hand through his damp hair, trying to convince himself it was just a nightmare. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. The whisper still echoed in his mind. "You are mine." Kevin didn't sleep for the rest of the night. He sat on his bed, eyes locked on the corner where the shadow had appeared. The next morning, Donnie, his roommate, noticed something was off. "Dude, you look like you've been hit by a truck," Donnie said, raising an eyebrow as Kevin slumped into his chair at their small, shared kitchen table. Kevin hesitated before replying. I had a bad night." "Bad night? Bro, I literally saw you struggling in your sleep. Your arms were twitching like you were fighting someone." Kevin froze. "You saw me?" "Yeah," Donnie said, taking a sip of his coffee. "I almost woke you up, but you stopped moving after a few seconds, so I figured you were just having a nightmare." Kevin clenched his fists. "It wasn't just a nightmare," he whispered. Donnie frowned. "What do you mean?" Kevin took a deep breath. "I've been having sleep paralysis, but last night, there was something in the room with me. A shadow." Donnie snorted. "Dude, you've been watching too many horror movies." "I'm serious, Donnie," Kevin insisted, his voice shaking. "It whispered to me. It said, 'You are mine.'" For the first time, Donnie's face turned serious. "Okay, that's creepy." "Yeah," Kevin muttered. After a few seconds of silence, Donnie spoke again. "Listen, I don't know what's going on, but maybe you should record yourself sleeping. You know, just to see if anything weird happens." Kevin nodded slowly. It wasn't a bad idea. That night, he set up his phone on his desk, camera facing his bed. Before lying down, he hesitated, staring at the dark corner of the room. It looked empty now, but the memory of last night sent a shiver down his spine. He climbed into bed and forced himself to close his eyes. The climax. The next morning, Kevin checked the recording. At first, nothing seemed unusual. He fast-forwarded through the first few hours, watching himself toss and turn in bed. Then, around 3:17 a.m., something changed. Kevin stopped moving completely. His body was stiff. Then, out of nowhere, his chest began rising and falling erratically, as if he was struggling to breathe. And then, the shadow appeared. It emerged slowly from the dark corner. growing taller and taller until it towered over the bed. Kevin's sleeping body began twitching violently. The shadow leaned in closer, and though its face was featureless, Kevin could feel it staring at him. Then, something even more terrifying happened. Kevin's mouth opened, but it wasn't him speaking. In a deep, distorted voice, his sleeping self whispered, "Let me in." Kevin's stomach twisted in fear. He slammed his laptop shut, breathing heavily. What was happening to him? Desperate for answers, Kevin skipped class that day and visited an old bookshop downtown. He had heard rumors that the owner, Mr. Elian, knew about paranormal phenomena. When Kevin explained his situation, Mr. Elian listened carefully before nodding. "What you're dealing with isn't just sleep paralysis." Kevin's throat was dry. "Then what is it?" Mr. Elian leaned in. "It's a watcher." "A what?" "A dark entity that feeds on fear. It starts with paralysis, making you weak and vulnerable. But if you let it take control..." He paused, his gaze intense. "It can replace you." Kevin's heart pounded. "Replace me?"
"Yes," Mr. Elion said. "Every time it visits, it takes a little more of you. If you don't stop it, one day, you won't wake up as yourself." The final night, Kevin barely made it back to his dorm before nightfall. Every instinct told him to stay awake, but he was exhausted. As soon as he lay down, he felt it. The heavy pressure, the cold air, the presence. Kevin opened his eyes, and there it was. The shadow loomed over him, closer than ever. It didn't just stand there this time. It climbed onto his chest. Kevin tried to scream, but nothing came out. The shadow bent down, its featureless face inches from his. Then, in that same distorted voice, it whispered, "Let me in." Kevin struggled, his muscles burning. No, not this time. Summoning all his strength, he focused on his fingers, forcing them to move. First one, then another, then his arm. He clenched his fist and swung. The second he made contact, the shadow shrieked, recoiling. The pressure on his body lifted. He gasped, rolling out of bed. He could move. For the first time, he had fought back. The shadow retreated into the corner, writhing in agony. Kevin didn't hesitate. He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it at the figure. It vanished. The twist ending. The next morning, Kevin felt different. Lighter, like a weight had been lifted off his chest. He stretched and smiled. It was over. Donnie, still half asleep, glanced at him. "Dude, you look different." Kevin grinned. "I feel great." Donnie chuckled. "Guess that thing finally left you alone, huh?" Kevin nodded, but something about his smile seemed off. Later that day, Donnie noticed something strange. Kevin had always had a small scar on his left cheek from a childhood accident. But now, it was gone. And when Donnie looked into Kevin's eyes, he swore. For just a second, they turned completely black.